we live in kind of difficult times. You know, Paul said to Timothy that in the last times, perilous times would come, times of distress, times of difficulty. And I think we're finding ourselves there. So, of course, you'll be familiar with my my topic this weekend. Get up there, Paul, maybe? Well, he's working on it. But it comes from the sermon, from the Olivet prophecy. When Jesus says, when you know that everybody's head's hanging down because of the way the earth has got to be, by the conditions that we're experiencing, that it's time for us, what? To lift up your heads, rejoice, because our redemption's drawing near. And that's our great hope. So, I'm not going to use a whole lot of PowerPoints, fortunately. I find they get kind of distracting. They kind of constrain you in a way when you're speaking. But I have one slide at the beginning that when the tech crew gets it all sorted out, I want you to have a look at it. But I'll tell you in advance what it is. Here's what I want to accomplish this weekend. First of all, I think if we're going to solve a problem, we've got to identify the problem. So the first thing is to sort of, in our own minds, and in the second class, maybe we'll do a little brainstorming, to identify and confront the things which burden us and sap our spiritual strength. The things that makes our heads hang down, maybe. So the first point is identifying the problems. The second one is to encourage a positive and optimistic spirit that prizes our faith. Because when we've got that, we're in good shape. And finally, I want to think about what the implications of that cheerful and optimistic faith are. How that ought to change the way we live. So I want to consider how our faith is reflected in a life of cheerful service. So we all know the story. We got it? Good. Can you flip me through this just to review them real quick? Oh, no, you're at the end of it somewhere. But that's a good verse. There we are. These are the things that we want to accomplish. We want to identify and confront the burdens that sap our spiritual strength. We'll even do a little brainstorming in the next class. And let's get a positive, optimistic spirit. Let's stir that up in ourselves. And then think about not just us, but how that spirit, what kind of effect it has on the lives we live and the witness we make. All right, so we're done with the screen for the time being. Let's put ourselves back with Jesus and the disciples, right? Week before he's going to be crucified. And they come out of the temple and they're saying, look at all those beautiful stones. Josephus says the temple was just absolutely marvelous building. And they're admiring it. They're right there. And Jesus says, you know what? Not going to be left one stone standing on another. And Jesus has been acting odd as far as they're concerned lately. They can't figure him out. So they're stirring this over in their mind. And then that evening, when they've gone across the valley to the Mount of Olives, they say, tell us when this is going to happen. What will be the sign of your coming? And, you know, like us, we live in difficult times. We like to know when's the Lord going to show up. Now, what is Jesus talking about? He talks about wars and famines and pestilences and earthquakes. He talks about persecution and martyrdom and people falling away from the faith, families divided. And he says, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. Right? Think about that. What's that mean? Iniquity abound. Some I think it's because the world is so sinful. It's so appealing and so that the love of the truth collapses. Or maybe it's also for us to be living in a rough and tumble kind of dog-eat-dog world that become more focused on ourselves and we lose the first love that we had for the gospel and for our brothers and sisters. Or maybe it's just that the world is so messed up that we get discouraged. And that's our reaction to all the problems. So it would be nice if we knew when it's all going to end. And I think that's what the disciples were asking. He just told them that their beautiful temple was going to be destroyed. And Jesus, when he answers them, he describes a lot of things that could make us despair or get discouraged. Now, I want to bring your attention to a couple things that Jesus says that maybe we don't always focus on. First thing is, when he talks about the wars and rivers of wars and earthquakes and all this, he says, that's not what you're looking for. Those aren't the signs of his coming. These things are just the beginning of signs. All these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet, Jesus says. And the second thing is, in Mark's account of all this, Jesus says, the angels don't know. I don't know. Only God knows. Right, so he's saying, I can't give you the time anyway, even if that's what you're asking. But instead what he tells them is, here's the answer to your question. You've got to be what? Watching. He says, watch. So that you can watch, and not only watch, and what else? And watch and pray. That's right. And then he says, he that endures to the end shall be saved. So we got to be watching and praying. Got to be ready. Got to have our heads lifted up. And it's in the context of all that. Can you give me a slide there, Philip? Number 3. That's not Philip. That's Paul. Oh, no, sorry. Give me my list. Y'all look a lot alike. Can you give me the next slide there? There you go. This is where we've taken our theme from today. There shall be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity. Now this is when Jesus has switched over to speak about the things immediately before his coming. And now you see I got the word perplexity highlighted. It's an interesting word because it means no way out. Like this is problems that don't have any solution at all. In fact, it's kind of interesting. One more slide there, Phil. It's used, the same word is used in the Greek Old Testament in Isaiah chapter 24. And I've got a little bit of up on the screen. You might want to have a look at this one. This is a chapter to be familiar with. It really is clearly talking about latter-day problems. In fact, it ends in verse 23 with the solution to all the problems when the Lord of hosts will reign gloriously on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem and before his elders gloriously. But you notice, for instance, it says in verse 1, the Lord makes the earth empty and makes it waste, distorts its surface, scatters abroad its inhabitants. Verse 3, the land shall be entirely emptied and utterly plundered. The earth mourns and fades away. The world languishes and fades away. The haughty people of the earth languish. The earth is also defiled under its inhabitants, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, broken the everlasting covenant. The earth is violently broken. You know, when you hear about some of the environmental concerns, about the climate change issues and all these sorts of things, you see the world is in a mess. And men's hearts are failing them for fear, and their heads are hanging down. It says the earth is shaken exceedingly. That's in our English versions. But in the Greek Septuagint, it's the same word as Jesus used. Completely perplexed. So we are living in times of unprecedented troubles. And it's in this context that we have the theme for this weekend. Now, when these things begin to happen, look up, lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. Now, I'm not going to mention all the reasons our heads might be hanging down. You know, spend an hour on it, couldn't I? We get burdened by the meanness of society against the less privileged, against the immigrant. We get discouraged by all the talk about war and weaponry and billions of dollars spent daily in wars. And jet fighters that cost tens of millions of dollars. And the training of pilots that cost millions of dollars. And their special suits that keep them from passing out from the blood flowing out of their body in the wrong places. From, it's all this technology that's all put together at such expense. I'm not going to talk about money problems, how the economy's shot. I'm not going to talk about the disintegration of morality, because y'all are familiar with all these things. I won't get into that. But I will say this, they can leave us with our heads hanging low. And what Jesus is saying to us is that when men's hearts are filling them for fear, when everybody's walking around with their head down, that's the time for us to look up, lift up your heads, your redemption draws near. There's a couple of Psalms that I think might have been in Jesus' mind when he made this statement about lifting up your heads. First one, if you'd open up with me to Psalm 3. This Psalm, Psalm 3, it tells us in the title of the Psalm that it was when he fled from Absalom. Remember Absalom? And what a disaster that son of David was. He set himself up in a little place outside the city of Jerusalem. So that when people were coming to get the king's judgment, he could intercept them because he was ambitious. He was winning the people over, giving them kingly advice, He was the one who killed his brother Amnon. Right? He was the one, you could go on. But finally, he led a rebellion, and David had to run away. And David, you can imagine what David's frame of mind was. He's looking back going, man, I made some mistakes. Man, I set him a terrible example, what I did with Bathsheba there. Right? Set him a terrible example. I didn't restrain Absalom. I didn't say, no, son, no, don't do that. He let him go. David had a lot of reason for being pessimistic and sad. I brought this on myself, he might have been saying. You think maybe David's head was hanging down? Well, look at Psalm 3. I want to read it in its entirety. Lord, how are they increased to the trouble? Many are they that rise up against me. Many there be which say of my soul, there's no help for him in God. But thou, O Lord, art a shield for me, my glory, and the lifter up of mine head. There it is. I cried unto the Lord with my voice. How else are you going to cry unto the Lord? I think a lot of times we cry unto the Lord sort of in our mind. But I'll tell you what, I used to, when I was still working, I worked in a place that was all isolated in Park Lake. And I'd get on my bike after work sometimes, and I'd go for a ride on my bike. And there would be times I'd be crying out to the Lord with my voice. And I think we sometimes, the prayer out loud, even when we're by ourselves, is a very valuable thing. David cried unto the Lord with his voice, and he heard me out of his holy hill. And then look what happens. I laid me down and slept. I awaked, for the Lord sustained me. I'll not be afraid of 10,000s of people that have set themselves against me round about. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for thou hast smitten all mine enemies upon the cheekbone. Thou hast broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongeth unto the Lord. Thy blessing is upon thy people. Isn't that a marvelous song? And Jesus is so full of the scriptures, the word made flesh. When David says about lifting up my, you're the one that lifts up my head. I think he might have been thinking about this one. Let me show you another. Next one's Psalm 24. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and all they that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. Who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord, or who shall stand in his holy place? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart, who hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully, he shall receive the blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. Brothers and sisters, I hope that's all of us, so that we can ascend into the hill of the Lord. Look at verse 6. This is the generation, this is the story of those that seek me, that seek thy face, O Jacob. A day is coming when we're going to go up to Jerusalem with great joy. Now look at this ending verses. Verse 7. Lift up your heads, O ye gates. It's like as if he's telling Jerusalem, the city itself, time to straighten up. Why? Be ye lift up ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, even lift them up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. And that's why we're here. Is we all have that vision. And we want to be those with the clean hands and pure hearts. We're able to ascend to the hill of the Lord. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. Remember the butler and baker? And how that in prison they were with Joseph and they had those dreams. Joseph told the butler his dream meant that God would lift up his head. He would bring him back to his previous position. So it's like the psalmist is saying here, straighten up Jerusalem. Big things are coming. Look up, lift up your head. Your redemption draws near. The Lord strong and mighty is coming. Be ready. All right, so here's where we've got so far. We live in discouraging times. Everybody agree with me on that one? Okay. Jesus has told us to watch. Can't tell us a specific time, but he's told us it's going to be difficult times. There's always been troubles, wars, earthquakes, famines, pestilences, earthquakes, but the last days are going to be particularly bad. And he's told us to lift up our heads. So the challenge we face in our personal lives are things we need to deal with. And this weekend, we want to identify the problems. We want to think about what we can do to be ready personally. We want to think about what we can do to help our brothers and sisters. And I want us to encourage us to a positive attitude, counting our blessings. Here's a good psalm. If you got the slide there, slide number 5, a psalm of David. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that's within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. Count your blessings. Who forgives all your iniquities. He forgives our iniquities. And we're going to talk about burdens. Iniquity is one of those burdens. He lifts our burdens. He heals our diseases. He redeems our life from destruction and crowns us with loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfies your mouth with good things so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. All right. Blank screen there now. I'm going to change subject. I'm going to talk about one particular bird right now and how we should deal with it and how we shouldn't deal with it. We talk about politics. See some big hook coming out of the wall over here. But no, we don't talk about that here. Now I want to talk about politics without taking sides in it. I think no matter what our inclinations are, we might say that the political situation in this country and around the world is one that might have our heads hanging down. There's a level of nastiness that's unprecedented in the United States. Just to mention a detail that maybe doesn't even matter that much relative to other stuff, but the obscenity that elected officials use, and this was bipartisan, and here coming even from the president in international relations, it's just shocking. It's unprecedented. It's never been like this. That's just the tip of the iceberg. We're seeing an unraveling with any conventions of decency, of respect, of kindness, of propriety, and all happening in an unprecedented way. We live in a messed up world. So how do we react to the genuine wrongs in society that affect us or those that we love? This is not an easy question. How do we respond to all of this? I've known a number of people, again, on both sides, both inclinations, politically kind of. I've heard people on both sides of things say, I don't want to think about it. I don't listen to the news anymore. I don't want to, I don't want to hear it. I don't think that's the solution. But I can tell you one thing that's for sure not the solution. I've heard tell that some brothers and sisters have taken to voting, taken part in politics. And I think I can understand why. Surely when people vote, anybody who votes knows that their one vote doesn't count for a hill of beans, really. It's like a change in the thing. So why do they vote? Well, the reason we vote is because we want to identify what we believe in. There's an old saying, I don't know, well, some of you are my age, older, you might remember it, about nailing your colors to the mast. You ever heard that one? No? I guess I'm really old. There you go. That's it. Look, back in the day, back when they would have big naval battles, and they'd have one boat firing cannons at another boat, you'd run your flag up. This is the flag of the USA. We got that up there, and this says who we are, and we're going to fly that flag. And if you get beat up hard enough, you lower the flag. That's the way it's going. All right, we give up. Now, if you go into the battle saying, doesn't matter what's happening, no way, no how am I going to pull that flag down, you send somebody up and they nail the colors to the mast. You can't bring it down. So sometimes we say that we nail our colors to the mast by a vote. We say, this is what I believe in, or this is what I don't believe in. I'm either voting for this guy or I'm voting against this guy, but we've nailed our colors to the mast. And so I think some people feel, in brothers and sisters, feel that maybe it's appropriate for them to take part in politics because they're nailing their colors to the mast. And here's my response to that. You're nailing your colors to the wrong mast. There's a different mast. There's a different identity that we ought to have. We belong to Christ. We know the solution to these problems. We know the only hope. We know that it's not man who walks to direct his steps. So we don't want to get involved because, look, no matter what colors we put up there, there's going to be things that we don't agree with that we can't possibly agree with. Right? We don't want to be just choosing, well, it's the lesser two evils. So that's what a lot of people say, lesser two evils. Well, we have something that has no evil at all in it. I have for you a scripture that I think is just perfect for this topic. It's Psalm 146. And I'm going to talk a few times this weekend about aha moments, where all of a sudden something you've seen a million times, but you didn't really see it. And then all of a sudden it sinks in. And oh yeah, aha, I got it. Psalm 146. I had an aha about this one. So Psalm 146, I hope, is a familiar psalm to y'all, as we use it all the time, and we use it rightly to teach that man is mortal, that when he's dead, he's gone. He's, you know, when you die, your thoughts perish, is what the psalm says. So the part we always use in this psalm, and what this psalm might be familiar to you for, is in verses 3 and 4. Put not your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. His breath goes forth, he returns to his earth. In that very day, his thoughts perish. And there we have it. It's the undoing of Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, where God formed man in the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and he became a living soul. Well, it says the breath goes forth, he returns to his earth, and that very day, his thoughts perish. John 3:16, everybody knows it. God so loved the world that he that believeth in him should not perish. Well, that's what happens to people. They perish. It's the end of them. And we can use this psalm very well for that point. And that's the legitimate point, but that's not what the psalm is really about. This psalm is about who we put our trust in. So look at the beginning of it. Praise ye the Lord. Praise the Lord, O my soul. While I live, will I praise the Lord. I will sing praises unto my God while I have any being. Put not your trust in princes or the Son of Man, in whom there's no help. His breath goes forth. He returns to his earth. And that very day, his thoughts perish. The very best of men, the very best intentioned and everything. You know what? They're mortal. And ultimately, they're going to die. But along the way, they're going to show us that they have feet of clay, that they do things that are immoral. But it's not where we put our trust. Keep reading. Verse 5. Happy is he that hath the God of Jacob for his help, whose hope is in the Lord his God, which made heaven and earth, the sea and all that therein is, which keepeth truth forever. This is not somebody who's going to die and all his plans end. God's the creator. Look at the things he does and think of these in terms of maybe modern political desiderata, the things that people want politics to accomplish. He executes judgment for the oppressed. Well, there's something, right? He executes judgment for the oppressed. He gives food to the hungry. How about that? He looses the prisoners. People who are in jail shouldn't ought to be there, been oppressed. He lets them go. The Lord opens the eyes of the blind. The Lord raises them that are bowed down. The Lord loveth the righteous. The Lord doesn't look down his nose at somebody as a weakling because they're a moral person. That's what the princes sometimes do. The Lord preserves the stranger. He relieves the fatherless and the widow. You know how many times that phrase, fatherless and widow, something like 30 times in the law of Moses. You got to look at the fatherless and widow because that's what God does. The way of the wicked, he turns upside down. The Lord shall reign forever, even thy God, O Zion, unto all generations. Praise ye the Lord. Let's not get into politics. Taking sides, putting our trust in men. Let's be informed about what's going on. We do live in perilous times, and we want to know about that. Because it'll tell us, okay, time to lift up your heads, look up, for your redemption draws near. We know the solution. I'm going to say more about personal witness, I think next class. But there's no question that the problems the world is facing, problems of our times, the solution we know about are a great invitation to folks to learn the truth. Our vote, if we vote in politics, is just nailing the colors to the wrong mast. It's best to show the banner of Christ. All right, I want to conclude this class by looking at a set of Psalms that are particularly appropriate because they're called Psalms of Ascent, Psalms of going up. Now, if you're familiar with the King James Bible, if for some reason it's translated Psalms of Degrees, but the better translation, all the modern versions say Psalms of Ascent. It's a set of Psalms that are kind of interesting. They have similar themes, and they all start off with a Psalm of Ascents or a Psalm of Degrees. They're Psalms 120 through, let's see, what would that be? 134, 15 of them. There's 15 of them. Some people think that they might have had to do with Hezekiah. Because when the miracle with the sundial, that it went back 15 or 10 degrees, or maybe 10 steps, maybe it was the shadow on the steps of Hezekiah's palace. And Hezekiah had 15 years added to his life. And not only that, one of these Psalms of Ascent talks about when God saved Jerusalem, which is really, really fitting for the life of Hezekiah. Here's how a few of them start. Psalm 120, in my distress, I cried unto the Lord. Psalm 121, I will lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help. Psalm 122, I was glad when they said to me, let us go up to the house of the Lord. Psalm 123, unto you I lift up my eyes, O you who dwell in the heavens. Skip one. Psalm 125, those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be moved but abides forever. Psalm 130, out of the depths have I cried to you. So all these Psalms of Ascent, start off at a distance. They have in them something about a trusting journey and an arrival in Zion and blessing and praise. Another thought about the Psalms of Ascent is that they might have been used at the pilgrimage feasts, the 3 feasts every year where all the Jewish folks were supposed to go up to Jerusalem. And I got thinking of these Psalms in connection with the topic of looking up because of Psalm 121, verse 1. I will lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help. Now, it turns out there's 2 different ways of looking at that verse. The first has the psalmist standing in a valley, and he's in big trouble. And he's looking all around, he's saying, what am I going to do for help? And he looks up the hills, he says, oh, I hope, if only there was a great big army of my friends coming rushing down that hill. Wouldn't that be great? The other way is that the psalmist is down there in his distress and he sees the solution up there. And I like this one better because this, I think, fits in with the notion of the Psalms of Ascent being what the pilgrims sang when they went up to the Feast of Tabernacles and the Feast of, all to the what are the 3 feasts? Pentecost? But I got it written down here and I never can remember, especially if I'm standing in front. I shouldn't say this is being recorded. That's the 3 feasts. I got it written down. There we go. Passover, which other? Good, I'm not alone. Pentecost and Tabernacles. 3 times a year, Jewish believers are supposed to go up. And as they're going up, they're walking up, and Jerusalem's way up in the hill, and they can look up to the house of God and then say, "That's where my help is. I look up to the hills, and that's where my help will come from the house of God." I like that. So actually, I'd like at the end of this class, if it's possible, we could sing Psalm 121, which is hymn 60. I just felt if everybody knows this, he said he didn't think so, but he said, y'all are good singers. So we'll work it out. My help, let me read you Psalm 121. My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve you from all evil. He shall preserve your soul. The Lord shall preserve your going out and your coming in, this time forth and forevermore. I titled this class, Where Are We Looking? And the signs of the times, Jesus told us of a time when we might be looking down. And we're now in a position where we've got to be looking up. Politics is a vain hope. Jeremiah said, it's not in man that walks to direct his steps. But Psalm 146 tells us, blessed is he who has the God of Jacob for his help. So from whence comes mine aid? Our help comes from the Lord. Here's what I want. Here's my peroration. Here's what I want to say for this class. We need to intuitively, naturally, and instinctively turn to God in times of trouble. And we can do it with full assurance of faith and a cheerful hope that our redemption is drawing near.